Alright, hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm hoping to keep this video not too long, but we'll see. I want to talk about Overwatch League players and retirement, because it seems like a somewhat recent trend has been a large number of Overwatch League players retiring. I have a list up here of several players that have retired, but just in the past week, we saw two different players retire. We saw DeFran, of course, from the Atlanta Reign retire, and Stellar from the Toronto Defiant. Now, they both had their different reasonings. For DeFran, it was just that he wasn't feeling doing competitive, pro Overwatch anymore, which I'm not very surprised by. I was surprised that he even joined the Overwatch League in the first place. This, to me, it was the natural thing for him to do. I 100% expected him to do it. I didn't think he would last a whole season. I thought he did it as well as you could as someone who retired. But then you have Stellar, who cited family and personal reasons. I believe health was a big part of it as well. That was the same thing with Silk Thread, who, of course, played for the LA Valiant, and then then was traded to the Gladiators, and then was supposed to sign, and did actually sign with the Chengdu Hunters, and then left the Overwatch League, specifically retired from the Overwatch League because of fear over kind of the amount of work that he was putting into it. He still plays esports. He plays Apex Legends for Gen G. So clearly, right, there's something going on here with some players retiring, and it's potentially something about work. Then you have Gambler and Demiro, both of whom are now streaming. Both of them formerly of Seoul Dynasty, and now Gen G. And before that, they were both Lunatic High. Actually, that's a lie, because Gambler wasn't Lunatic High. I think Miro was, though. Yeah, so you have, they just kind of moved to a streamer position instead of playing. The Miro said he hasn't kind of ruled it out. The same thing goes for a player like Seagull, who has focused on streaming because that is more of what he likes to do. And of course, he's a very well-known streamer. He's a very good streamer. So you have a lot of players who their reason for retiring was, either they wanted to go to streaming, or they wanted to move over to something else, or personal reasons. You have Mistakes, so I don't know exactly his reasoning for retiring, but he is also a retired player at this point in time. But what I see when I look at all of this stuff, and what I kind of look at is, that's a decent number of players that have retired, right? And in a lot of cases, seemingly out of nowhere, and it definitely brings up the question of, well, why are all these players retiring, or I guess in a way moving to these different areas? Now, I genuinely think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that if you're a really, really, really good streamer, someone like DeFran or Seagull, you're going to make more money streaming, most likely, and it's more something you do in your own time, and you don't have to do the getting up every morning and going to the practices and doing all that kind of stuff. So I think there is an element of, if you are a successful streamer, and that's just kind of the life that you have been following for a while, it's something that you don't really want to go away from that, because I feel like it's just more enjoyable than being a player where you have all of these things that you have to do, all of these team requirements, team commitments that you have, league commitments that you have. You can't stream at certain times. You're practicing and scrimmaging all day. It makes sense why I think there are so many of these players that do move over when you see this thing. But it's something that I think is genuinely worrisome if you are the league, because you're having players who are saying, yeah, um, I can be in the league all I want for a while, but streaming's gonna make me more money. It's more enjoyable than competing, and maybe that's not the case for everybody. Obviously, the majority of players are still, the majority of players that were in the Overwatch League in season one and are no longer in the Overwatch League didn't retire. They just got released and then are no longer in the Overwatch League, but they might be somewhere else. They maybe, change their careers. You have a player like Avast who is now casting contenders who used to play for the Boston Uprisings. You have players that are moving around and they're doing different things. But in general, you wonder if there is something to look into when you have players who are just retiring because they feel like they would rather do something else. If there's one thing that I think kind of gives hope, it's DeFran saying like, "Look, this isn't the life for me." But he also said it was so much better than I expected it to be, and a lot better than I imagined it would be, that I think doing it was a super smart thing. And he basically said he was really glad that he did it. So that makes me kind of say, there are things that they're doing to make people want to stay. But I think it's something that you see when you have a player like Seagull or even XQC or DeFran who have these huge, huge, huge Twitch streams where they just play Overwatch, right? They can do it more casually. They can even play other games. They don't have to just play Overwatch. They can do things on their own time, obviously. And I've said this already multiple times, but it's the idea that you have to kind of understand is like these players that do this, they might say, hey, I can play professionally, but how long am I going to keep playing professionally anyway, right? I probably only really do realistically have so long in the professional scene before I get replaced, or I just don't feel like playing anymore, or I just can't play at the level that I did. And then you just kind of start to notice, eventually it's just kind of like, yeah, not much I can do. And it just gets to the point where streaming's more enjoyable. I definitely, I don't have any issues, right? I don't have any problems with DeFran or Siegel, deciding to retire to focus on streaming, especially if it came to a point where playing in the Overwatch League wasn't really enjoyable anymore. If you don't like it, then why would you stay? Type thing. Or I guess you could like it, but not as much as you like streaming and just kind of having your own downtime, which I guess is not the full way to go into it, because I feel like most people enjoy doing their hobbies more than they enjoy going to work. But in the same way that like if you're streaming, right, and it's like you really like doing that and you just dread going into work, that's where it's like a problem. If you dread going in to play on stage, well, then that's a problem, and that's what you need to address, and that's the thing that you need to figure out. So back to kind of the thing with the Overwatch League players or Overwatch League organization is this something to worry about? And if it is, what do you do to fix it? What do you do to make people want to stay in the league more? Do you cut back on the amount of games even more? Do you make it where teams are playing 0 or 1 game per week instead of 0 to 2 games per week? Because some teams I have pretty much just played 2 games a week every single week, right? So do you cut back and say, hey, we're going to roll, instead of having all of the teams play 2 games every single week, we're going to max out, say, 1. You're going to play 1 game a week, you're going to play 2 games a week. Would that help players with the burnout? Would you put aside like a set amount of time that teams are allowed to scrimmage per week? Do you cut that back so that players aren't getting burnt out as much? The problem with that, of course, is that the product that you're putting out on stage at that point is getting somewhat worse. You're not getting as high quality of games if you have players that aren't practicing as much. Realistically, you're not getting as high quality stuff. So it's kind of a balancing act. I think that we'll have to see what the league does if this becomes a problem. And I don't see it right now as being too big of a problem. I think the majority of players are happy where they are. They play at a high level because they want to play at a high level, and they enjoy playing at a high level. It's not something that's like, oh, every single player in the league would rather stream than compete, so they're all just going to leave the league, and then you're going to have every season you're going to have to replace every team's players. For some players, this is the more enjoyable thing than streaming. There's some players, I don't know how often they stream, if they even stream really ever. I'm sure they stream to some level and some degree, but I can't, say fully how much they're putting in streaming. But it's a very, very interesting path that you see with the way that we have very mirrored things. XQC, his situation obviously somewhat different, where he kind of was toxic and a problem, and then he got released and then just didn't join the league again. So you have him, and that's kind of why he's the interesting case. But he's kind of retired. He went from playing to streaming, and he does World Cup and whatnot still, so he's not completely out of the scene, but for the most part, I mean, he's not really competing to the same level that he was in the past. But I mean, really, Seagull and DeFran are kind of the two to look at of players who are like, yeah, streaming is just a lot easier, right? It's a lot better. They're kind of the big streamers. They're two of the biggest streamers in Overwatch in general. So you have two players who are just, done. They're just like, yeah, no, I'm good. I have really no desire to keep playing. I'm moving on. I'm going to switch to a streaming role, which I think is understandable. I think it's respectable. I genuinely think it is something that I'm not super surprised by it personally. It's something I won't say I expected from some of the players. I definitely expected it from DeFran. Like Seagull, I didn't think he would retire at the end of the first season, then he did. But DeFran is someone who I did expect to not make it through the entire season. But I don't really know what to make fully of all the retirements. I want to see kind of what we get as the season progresses. If it becomes another issue or something that becomes even more frequent, that's when I'd start to say it's a problem. But until then, I don't know. I do know that I saw a tweet of something that was like, the amount of Overwatch League players that retire compared to the amount of League of Legends players that retire is insanely high. And I don't really have experience with League of Legends esports, but if that is true and that is the case, it is something, of course, interesting to look at. I think there definitely needs to be a lessening of burnout, even more reasons to get players to do other things, more reasons to get players to be more motivated to do, or just to give players more free time, right? And I think that that's something super important to get situated as early as possible for the league, and I think it makes it better and easier for the players if they have more time for themselves, which I think would help out, and maybe would cut back on some of these retirements. But we'll have to see the way it goes going forward. We can't be too positive about how it's going to go until we see what the future holds. But that is everything I have for you, everything I want to talk about with this whole streamer burnout, streamer retirement thing. If you have any thoughts on it, let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. But I'm going to get out of here. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing, as those help out a bunch. But until the next time, I am going to get out of here. Thank you once again for watching, and bye-bye.